to life. Inner circles here where voices thrive. Turn on your screens, let the magic unfold. Listening and healing as stories are told. Come one, come all, this is your time. No topics too tough, just heed the calls. From mental health woes to justice we seek. Together we rise for the strong and the meek. A safe space for all, let's lift every voice.
Welcome to the Inner Circle podcast. I'm your host, Abe Kamara, and tonight we are honored to welcome Representative María Isa Pérez-Vega for a powerful conversation on protecting immigrants in uncertain times. When politics threatens peace of mind and fear replaces belonging, we'll lean into truth, leadership, and conversation. So tonight we have Representative Pérez-Vega here with us to help us to navigate, stay in limbo, protecting legal immigrants and make political uncertainty. Again, I'm your host, Abe Kamara, and it is the Inner Circle podcast. I have my panelists with me, Jerry. Jerry, if you can introduce yourself quick, and then we'll give the representative the opportunity to dive into this. So.
Hi, everyone, and hi. Thanks for being here. So I'm Jerry, obviously an immigrant living in Minnesota, and this is a topic of interest to me. So, yeah, I'm looking to learn from you today.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It's great to be here.
Okay. Well, folks, you can join the conversation. If you have any question for the representative, you can join the conversation by calling our number 952-594-5154, or you can put a comment in the chat. Just a little bit of the representatives at work, she's at the state capitol. So if something comes up, she have to jump, you know what I mean? Obviously, we have to reschedule her, but she's a very busy, and we appreciate her taking off her busy schedule to join us tonight. So let's dive right into it. Representative Pérez-Vega, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your background and why you went into public service?
Absolutely. Representative María Isa Pérez-Vega. I represent District 65B, which is the capital city of St. Paul, as well as the suburb of West St. Paul. I am a child of St. Paul. I'm a Boricua, Puerto Rican. My family came from New York City, Puerto Ricans from New York and the island in the 70s to the first Latino community in the state of Minnesota, which is the West Side community of St. Paul. My mother and father, I always highlight because I can't talk about my journey as to why I'm in politics without honoring my parents and their movements. Coming from New York City, as my father was drafted at 18 to the Vietnam War, as a Puerto Rican generation coming from Puerto Rican men who were drafted to war before then. And I talk about the military implementation because it plays a big role in to being political. My mother and my father grew up together in the New York City public housing, Baruch projects of the Lower East Side. When my father was drafted to NAM at 18, my mother was 16 years old, already serving as like the social worker in her project tenement, right? Like healthcare, food accessibility, childcare. She was 16 marching with the Young Lords movement, the Puerto Rican political organization. So why I'm sharing my story of my parents is because I come from a movement of activists that came here to Minnesota when the population of Latinos, let alone people of color, but the Latino population was under than 1%. So when we talk about immigration and my path of moving, I'm born here. Puerto Ricans are citizens. We come from Latin America and we're treated as second-class citizens. And when you come to a place like Minnesota, where it has been built by community of immigrants on indigenous land, it's important for me to note that those are the platforms. That's where I was born into, and this is the community that I represent now as a West Sider from St. Paul, and being from the capital city is a community that was built, a city that was built on the hard work and labors of immigrants, right? So when now as an elected official, I ran because I witnessed our family members, right? You marry into whether it's East African, whether it's Latin American, Mexican, Colombian, we're all in this struggle together, and
Yeah.
also recognizing the disparities amongst racial disparities in our own communities.
Yeah.
I come from a background of activism and arts, so my particular history comes back into being a youth worker and starting out in youth work and learning how to work within nonprofit sectors, because those are the avenues of how we continue to be able to whether it's learning languages,
For sure.
social services, housing,
Yeah.
arts, education. So my background, I started working at a very young age,
Yeah.
because I that's what we do in our communities.
Yeah.
It's village
Yeah.
work. And
Yeah.
so what made me run for office was, I'm a type 1 diabetic. I recognize working as an advocate for insulin for all, for Minnesota to be the first state in the country to have affordable, accessible insulin.
Okay.
That in the middle of COVID, and being a mother to a beautiful Afro Boricua daughter,
Yeah.
and recognizing our pride in our diaspora and the disparities that lay within the Latino community, and the uprising that happened due to the Minneapolis Police Department murdering
Yeah.
George Floyd, who worked
Yeah.
with me and was my security.
Yeah.
Everything is intersected into when my village called me to say, what are we doing? When buildings are burning, when kids don't have accessibility to rights in their education system.
Yeah. Yeah.
I've lived those experiences
Yeah.
since a young age. So I'm a hip hop artist. I've always rapped about it. And my community came to me to say, it's time to create the policy that you've been active as an activist and
Mhm.
community organizer. And I decided to run for office because my village called it, my people called it, and I'm from Minnesota.
Sure.
And
Sure.
Minnesota needs to catch up to
For sure.
what the community looks like.
Okay. How do you balance your creative work and your advocacy? How do you balance those two?
Oh, they're both. I always think to myself how my colleagues on both sides of the aisles, how do they do this without having a creative platform? Because, whew, that's my outlet, music and arts and drumming and connecting our children to recognize their power through the arts is my medicine. And so,
Mm-hmm.
right now, I will tell you one thing. In a trifecta, my first session, it was more accessible to be able to like tour in between. But
Yeah.
right now, we're creating the policy to be supportive to the next artists that will
Mm-hmm.
lead, that will
Mm-hmm.
continue to teach in the
Mm-hmm.
classroom, that will continue to create the policy with me as a lawmaker, and then with the hope that we don't have a special session, I get to go back on tour with my other job and
Yeah.
continue to create policy.
Okay. Okay. That's good. Jerry, do you have any question for Representative Vega?
Oh, no, not at the moment.
Okay. Representative Vega, how do you assess the current movement, right? Where in like, there's so much hostility towards immigrants, it's like there's so
Mm.
much negative narrative towards immigrants, even like, when Trump 2.0 came into being, it was all about, illegal immigration, violent criminals, but now you see like, legal immigrants, those with green cards, those with student visa have been arrested. How do you assess the current environment?
We speak about it. We don't hide. As soon as I call it people saying Trump 2.0, I call it, Trump on steroids. Um,
Okay.
I'm Puerto Rican, man. I
Yeah, yeah,
was an artist and working with nonprofits
sure, sure.
as not an elected official when the hurricane hit in the
Okay.
first Trump administration. And we organize amongst our people, not just Puerto Ricans, but our African community of East Africa, because they're like, Puerto Ricans is African,
Yeah,
our
yeah, yeah.
indigenous community coming in from all the tribal nations in the state that I've been touring with to protect water and treaty rights, because I'm born on this native of land, came together to talk about how we can protect water and get water and electricity when FEMA and the Trump administration were throwing paper towels. So
Yeah.
like now we're flash forward into what is a nightmare for folks maybe new to it.
Sure.
That's not new to me, and also the community of immigrants that are here.
Yeah.
When we talk about the 90s,
Yeah.
we talk about what my block as the first Latino community in the state of Minnesota that I was raised in, that I represent now. When we
Yeah.
were growing up, we seen raids happen, whether it was the Italians, whether it was Mexicans, Colombians, the Cuban rush of the post 80s during the Marielitos that were put in the prison system and then coming out and becoming students and knowing what they learned in a space that didn't have money, but everyone had an education, right? Like, so
Yeah.
you learn about the building blocks, and then we flash forward and we utilize with technology. And what I'm doing right now is talking about it. People feel that they got to be quiet. But Malcolm X always talked, if you're silenced, there's no power.
Okay. Yeah.
You speak about it. Tupac, I'm a hip hop artist. You come about from those avenues of building change and movement. And so I look at movements of peace. I look at the works of Nelson Mandela, who's a political prisoner. I look at the works of Rigoberta Menchú from Guatemala, who was the first Mayan to run for president. I talk about the avenues of how community and conversations is how we are going to be able, how we survive
Mm-hmm.
what is a continuance of a colonial regime. And
Okay.
so whether it's in this side of the world, but in particularly the eyes are on this side of the world,
Yeah.
it's about education.
Okay.
If we don't educate, whether you're on this side of the aisle or that side of the aisle, there's no way to be able to move forward. And it takes conversation, it takes risk. But that's what we're doing right now when it comes to immigration. We're protecting these laws.
Mm-hmm.
And we're also talking about the revenue. Some people don't understand, but also, they want to just hear about numbers, right? We're living through the Trump administration of the Elon Musk and billionaire boys club, right?
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
guess what? Y'all are billionaires because of the immigration,
Yeah.
paying taxes and
Sure.
and creating what we love, whether it's music where I come from in an industry, whether it's
Mhm.
architect, whether it's now seeing what the distribution looks like when you put tariffs into place.
Sure.
If you cut out immigrants, what's your country, man? This is native land.
Yeah. Yeah. What is your biggest concern regarding the current policies, right, from the Trump administration, right, from the federal government? What are your biggest concern regarding those current policies?
Our kids.
Okay.
Our connection with our kids, and our elders, and our healthcare, and our education system, the movements that have worked together through so much disparities. This the departments that are being completely frozen. So we look at, and if you think about, if you're dismantling immigration systems that come from poverty, that figure out how to, bring light when there's no light, feed people when there's no money to feed people, we survive. I think about my grandmother, who was a Puerto Rican woman who lived to be 103 years old. When she was 8 years old, she was in the mountains that Bad Bunny comes from, who's the biggest artist in the world right now, and her
Yeah.
dream was to have a pair of shoes to cross, to go to a school across the mountain, that the American government were forcing people to learn their history and dismantle ours. But we kept it together. What I fear is that they are connecting what's been able to keep us together through our
Mhm.
cultural endowments, through our solidarity and movements. They're trying to dissect and bring fear to that. We can't have that. Whether it's black and white, brown, this language, we got to circulate in that. I see this as an avenue. You got to change the poison into medicine, Abe. Okay?
Mhm.
The
Mhm.
poison is this messed up racist regime, classist regime.
Okay.
The medicine is the people who maybe have been sleepwalking to wake up and
Okay.
say, we got to fix this nightmare. We want to dream like I'm okay, right? Well, we
Mhm.
got to fix the nightmare, and that's going to take everybody working together. And there are going to be difficult challenges. There's war around, but we got to bring light to humanity.
Okay. Minnesota has historically been a very welcoming state, but in this current environment, right? What is the message to the immigrants community here? Can they feel safe? How can they navigate a current environment where there's so much negativity towards immigrants, where there's so much hostility? How can Minnesota, you as a state representative, what's the message to the immigrant community here in Minnesota and around the country?
I mean, I can talk about in Minnesota as an
Mhm.
elected official in the state
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
we are fighting for our immigrant communities.
Yeah. Okay.
We are fighting for the historic legislation that we passed in my first term. When we talk about driver's licenses for all, when we talk about accessibility to healthcare, protecting our kids in the school, it's rough right now.
Mhm.
I'm not going to come here to paint a Disney World picture, because that ain't the truth. Okay. And we got to keep it 100 so that we're surviving this. So our kids are protected. So our families are protected, and our communities are protected, regardless if we're documented or undocumented, regardless if we're citizens, born, third generation, whatever. It's about protection. So what we're doing at the state is, keeping folks informative, at least myself in my district, and having conversations with our congressional representation, to be informative and knowing our rights. In Minnesota, because we have our Attorney General Keith Ellison, blessed be, assalamu alaikum, my brother Keith, like that we are in particularly able to have someone who's defending those laws that we passed and protect us to be able to sue. I mean, already those cases, right, where our state is suing the federal government when it is attacking our communities, whether it is our immigrant community, whether it's our LGBTQ community, whether it's defending our rights to education. So those are the platforms that we're working at the local level, and protecting the legislation that we've been able to pass, such as healthcare, such as ethnic studies, just to learn about each other's cultures, right? And cultural competency and literacy in our schools, and public safety, like having these deep conversations. I met with several different sectors of public safety, whether it's state, whether it's city, whether it's county, in my districts, because I represent 2 cities, I represent 2 counties, right? 2 congressional districts, that we're all on board and making sure that people know their rights. That's first and foremost. So those are the conversations that have happened. I've been grateful to be able to host the first in St. Paul to talk about immigration safety publicly, where I brought colleagues of mine from the state that are from my St. Paul delegation as the chair of the St. Paul delegation, where we brought the Attorney General's office, where we brought Congressional District Betty McCullum's office of CD4. We had also folks from the city, our deputy mayor, right? Our city attorney of St. Paul, our West St. Paul, which is part of my district, our school board members, because immigration, you can't just talk, it's not just about the family household. It's about how everything functions, entrepreneurship, our businesses, our infrastructure, our schools, our healthcare. So that's what I've been able to like do in these posts. We're not holding back. We're engaging, and I'm trying to encourage, and I know I have and been working with other folks in my caucus, in the chamber of the House, to do this in their districts.
Okay. What role though do you like? What specific action, right, can state leadership play, right, in protecting like legal immigrants? Because like I know we talk. The administration said, this was all about illegal immigrants and violent criminals. But now, as I said earlier, right, we see legal immigrants being caught up in this, like folks with green card. What specific actions can state leadership play, right, to protect legal immigrants?
The action that we're like, I had to have a conversation with the director of ICE in Minnesota, right? Who is telling me that they are following the law of the president of the United States. And I'm, myself and other colleagues who have been working on immigration laws to protect immigrant rights here are like, we're here to protect the laws of the state. And so if you have constituents of mine that are telling me that they're getting pulled over and they're citizens, like hawked by, a racial profiling because they look Latino or they're East African, or, like the racial while they're going to drop their kids at these dual immersion schools, right? These cultural schools, or our communities, our cities that are full of immigrants, then I'm addressing that to be like, this is illegal. So if you're following the ordinance of the president of the United States, well, they got to follow the ordinance of our city and our state, because we have state laws here. And so that's the impact of like, what are we doing? We're working every day. We're protecting the rights of our immigrant community by the statutes of law that we've been able to implement, protecting the data for driver's licenses for all. Like, hey, that's there. That is a protection. That's how we voted and passed that law. Don't come with the federal stuff to say that we're going to intersect, and because that's illegal. And our attorney general's office is on it.
Okay. Well, folks, tonight we are discussing still in limbo, protecting legal immigrants amid this whole political uncertainty, right? There's a lot of noise around immigration right now. So tonight we have Representative Pérez-Vega in the building with us, educating us, giving us some ideas on what the state of Minnesota is doing and what the state legislature is doing to make sure that legal immigrants are protected. So you can join the conversation by calling our number 952-594-5154, or you can post a comment in the chat. With the other thing I want to attack, right, is like, I want to get to, as I said, there's so much negative narrative around immigrants, right? How immigrants commit crimes, how immigrants, is like, and then even, right, like, I mean, the president's, right, he's still putting at a higher number in terms of his immigration policy. What is driving all of this negativity around immigration? I mean, from your vantage point, what is driving this?
I mean, racism,
Mm.
classism. There's a great book out there for folks to read, and it's like, for our communities it may seem like common sense, but it's great to reflect on. It's called The
Okay.
Cast, and it's by the author Isabel. I forgot her last name. I mean, I read
Okay.
a lot, but like informative information that it came out in 2020 post the uprising
Okay.
after the murder of George Floyd, to
Okay.
talk about the Trump administration and before the Biden administration.
Okay.
And the reason why, like, I mean, being able to utilize literature and
Yeah.
informing ourselves with that's power.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, I always tell folks, read that out, because what's driving it is when you see Puerto Rican women from Minnesota who are rappers get elected into office.
Yeah.
That's not supposed to happen, right? When you see Somali women getting elected at time, you see Kenyan women in
Mhm.
areas where we ain't even, our mothers weren't even allowed, our grandmothers
Yeah.
weren't even allowed to vote, right?
Yeah.
Whether they were citizens or like the complexion, the last name.
Yeah.
So it's not much different going flashing forward. I had a conversation with my mother yesterday, just checking in, and with my elders and seeing, right, and just being village and being with mom,
Yeah.
to talk about what are their perspectives, right, as elders who have been through this. And their perspective is, oh God, we're losing everything we fought for.
Yeah.
We're losing everything that we dreamt on.
Yeah.
It's going to take a cooperative collaboration to excel. Look, man, immigrants bring revenue.
Mm-hmm.
And so folks don't want to get past the discrimination factors, the conversations that have to be taking place with people who are ignorant and just plain evil.
Okay.
Okay, like the Trump is numbers.
Yeah.
Okay. And so what we need is our communities not to be separated in these boxes. And I speak on that because, like, I don't just represent the Latino community. I represent
Yeah.
every community. I go
Yeah.
to every community, even in districts that may be red, purple, blue. Like, it starts with a conversation as to what's data and facts. And so
Yeah.
if the administration is pushing attacks
Yeah.
and violence and discrimination and human rights
Yeah.
violation. I mean, you see in the news about people citizens getting deported,
Yeah. Yeah.
detained, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or folks with the proper paperwork to not be detained,
Yeah.
happening. So it's like, it's not just about Maria standing up because I'm a Latina. It's not just about Representative Hussein, who represents, the other side of my district, who's a Somali man, the first
Yeah.
Somali elected in that position in his district.
Yeah.
It's not just about the Hmong community. It's about all of us advocating for our communities together.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that's a reality of facing fascism, because that's what we're dealing with right
Okay.
now.
Okay. So what can the immigrant community do then, right, to change this whole negative narrative? What it is can the immigrant community, as you said, right, all of us joining together, whether you're, Puerto Rican, you're from Africa, you're from South America, you're from North Africa, wherever you're from, right, is that what can the immigrant community do, right, to work together
Well,
to change this
number
whole
one is
narrative?
know your rights.
Okay.
Number one is know your rights.
Yeah.
Okay. Because if there is an issue of ICE, is like, know your rights. Okay. Number two is continuing to be, live your life. because they want us to fear. And not to say that we shouldn't, that our immigrant community shouldn't fear. I fear for our immigrant communities, but I'm not going to be scared in the work that I'm doing because that ain't going to make anything better. So
Okay.
connecting with your elected officials, informing them of what you go through, right? Delivering that testimony that if you can't be there in person, you're sending that to my offices so that if they're trying to take away healthcare rights or they're trying to come in and raid schools, that we're speaking up on this. Okay.
Okay.
Staying informative. Also, knowing your worth in a state, like I can talk about state politics, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Knowing your worth in this state and making sure that other folks know your worth. Because the
Yeah.
point that kills of the root of hatred is ignorance.
Yeah.
And if folks don't understand, like they, as an elected official, I represent immigrants. I represent undocumented people too, because by undocumented people, um, bring revenue to my district, create the
Yeah.
roads, are the businesses,
Yeah.
right? So
Mhm.
when those are the continuances that we have to do and to feel protected, if you gotta know your rights, you gotta fight for our rights right now, and we
Mhm.
gotta work together and reach out, reach out. I had I'm not gonna give any names, but I had a family that was concerned because they felt like they're being followed by ICE, their business, and they have a Mexican restaurant, and they have been here for 20 years and they were just concerned and they contacted my office. And you know what my office did? I called the federal representation because that's their job and
Okay.
making sure that they're doing their job to inform our constituents, our
Okay.
residents in our district, and that they're fighting for this,
Okay.
even at the Trump level.
Okay. Okay. Um.
Informative
Yeah. Yeah.
information, brother.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. Yeah. Definitely. That's good, though, right? I mean, I'm
And
glad you
connect
brought
with
that
an
up, right?
immigrant lawyer. Always, there's resources out there. I want to tell to the people that are tuning in, the Immigration Law Service of Minnesota.
Yeah.
These are the folks that connect with us as legislators so that we can build the policy
Mhm.
for human rights,
Okay.
for
Okay.
safety.
Okay. I mean, there are a lot of stories out there how, a lot of folks are afraid to go to work. Folks are afraid, especially in the immigrant community, to open their businesses because, like the fear that, right, ICE might come and raid them, right? I mean, what's the message to those folks, right? I mean, all of these, as I say, you mentioned, there's so much fear out there. There's so much, I said, negative things out there. I mean, folks don't know what to believe. What is the message to folks, right, who are afraid to go to work, who are afraid to go to their local businesses and things like that? What's the message to the immigrant community?
That you have rights
Mm.
and that you have rights in the state of Minnesota. And so if you don't know them, okay, connect with my office and we will connect you. Even if you're not my constituent, even if you don't live in my district, I will. This is a priority so that folks know their rights and the avenues of public safety. And the conversations, when I think about immigrant communities, I think about how the folks on the other side of the aisle that are ignorant to recognizing our humanity in our
Mhm.
communities, in the immigrant
Mhm.
communities, right? Is
Mhm.
the dollar, is the revenue. It's unfortunate because that's what they care about. But like, if you are not here to protect your laborers, whether it is in the hospitals, whether it's in think about Minnesota, our agricultural,
Mhm.
who's going to take care of your farm? If you're not protecting those folks that are good people, hardworking people that generate 12 billions of dollars in a $18 billion surplus,
Yeah. Yeah.
who's going to do, brother, who going to do that?
That's a good question, definitely, right? That's a good question. Well, folks, tonight we are discussing still in limbo, right? Protecting legal immigrants amid this whole chaos and fear in the immigrant community, so you can join the conversation by calling our number 952-594-5154 or putting a comment in the chat. Representative Pérez-Vega, what keeps you grounded, right? Amidst this whole political uncertainty. And, it's like, what keeps you grounded? What makes you like wake up every day to do the kind of work you do?
My daughter is my focus first and foremost, who turned 6 on April 10th, this
Great,
Thursday.
great, great, great.
Um, because it's the focus of reminding us why we're in this, or why,
Yeah.
because it's difficult, it's hard, it's challenging. And the people, bro, the power of the people, you know, um, everybody has a destiny and everybody has an empowerment of a blessing through our creator. And that is where the balance is. When days are hard, I'm getting blown up while I'm in this interview right now, and I probably should get off, but at the same time, I'm dedicated to my people and keeping that information. And it really is there because I believe in humanity. I believe in peace. Even when we live in war, even when we're living in the traumas of experiences, it's about the avenues of direction of staying focused. And so the balance is my community. Hey, I have constituents. I represent everybody. People who voted for me and people who don't. And I work for them. And the value is about creating together so that we are able to push over and all be able to have the luxury of life, of equal opportunity. And so what drives me is real talk, is the conversations, is the students of mine that I used to teach in juvenile detention centers that I see them now and they're writing me letters, or they see me at a platform in community say, I graduated and I never went back and I'm in college and I'm raising my family. And yeah, things are still struggling, but you know, there's hope. That right there, those are the stories that are driven by the commitment that we in community do together. And now being in the space of a politician and in my second term as an elected official,
Okay.
that's what keeps me together in that chamber that isn't so welcoming to people like me.
Okay. Okay.
It's the people, man. The power is within the people. Don't ever forget that. Don't ever forget that. And that's what our babies need to know. Our children, our youth. Our youth are the empowerment. They're the leaders. I take wisdom from the elders, but I also say if the elders are not connected with the youth, they've lost connection with themselves. So it's
Okay.
about bridging those generations together.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up the youth and the young generations, right? As they are watching all of these negative stories around immigrants, all of this whole immigration crackdown, what do you think they are internalizing, right? Does this country still mean what it is for them, right? Freedom. Um, uh, does this country still means the freedom that is available to to every citizen? What do you think the young generation, right, the youth are internalizing right now amidst the whole chaos around immigration?
The youth are, when I was a youth, we didn't have accessibility to, there was no social media, like I was like probably the last of the generation that couldn't really like Google anything. Like that came out like the college phase that was starting to come out.
Yeah.
But they able to see what's happening of what we already, we were communicating what's happening on the grounds, right? So the
Mm-hmm.
level of activism
Mm-hmm.
is so important with our youth. The youth are the leadership, and what I tell them when they're given, like I'll cancel meetings with folks that think that they can have a lobbying a strategy of like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, money, like that ain't the matter. I'd rather meet with the kids that want to learn about their culture in their schools right now that we're
Mm-hmm.
fighting, or the kids that are telling me that thank you, we're not starving, we want the meals to be better. And I'm like, well, we're working on that, that's the next thing. But they don't got to worry about paying for breakfast and lunch while they in school, you know what I'm saying? So like that doesn't happen without outreach and vocalizing those things. And they took a long time, and they're taking time to continue doing that in the space that we're at right now.
Okay.
Don't give up and speak up. And also recognize your trauma, because a lot of youth are going through this trauma because of social media, because they can see things that we didn't have accessibility to. But figure out how to change those poison into medicine by your gift. I always tell folks, we've got an ed finance bill right now that they're in negotiations, and we're in budget deadlines right now as we speak. And I always tell folks, like, if you give kids a drum, they won't pick up a gun.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you
Yeah.
connect, like if, and it don't cost that much. It don't cost billions of dollars, because you know what?
Yeah.
Our ancestors were surviving the middle passageway and
Yeah.
making sure that our drums connected to the gospels that they were forcing us to be here. And we're
Yeah.
out here still surviving off of that.
Okay.
The youth, what I tell you right now is You have to learn. Ain't nobody going to give you anything, and they won't care about their story. Sometimes they'll use your story to gain a platform of funding and put it in the wrong place.
Okay.
You got to learn how the system works in order to change it, in order to dismantle the disparities and the fight that we're doing. Feel that, because I was one of those youth. I was 14 talking with Paul Wellstone. Like in my
Yeah.
you running, I can't vote, but my parents can, and you the one making decisions off of me. Get to know how this system works so that you can actually get engaged in it, because you already are.
Okay.
So like what I tell my youth is like, you are the power. The youth are like if the folks are not focused, my whole thing, if you're not circling around our youth,
Sure.
man, they're the disruptive. The
Okay.
folks that are not incorporating our youth's perspectives and are sheltering our youth from the reality, that got to stop, because our youth are the leaders. I'm ready to put my movement, my breath, and my feet work to continue to uplift those youth.
Okay. The other thing, right, about the whole, there's a lot of noise. There's been a lot of news about immigrants traveling, back home to their various countries, coming, they're getting arrested, they're getting searched, right? So immigrants in Minnesota, what is the message to them right now? Right? Should they be traveling? Should immigrants be traveling to their home countries, for visit, or should they lay low? What's the message to them as a state representative, as an elected official?
It's real. These are the conversations to have with the federal government and your federal representation, and they're saying, it's uncertain times right now.
Okay. Okay.
I have a friend that is like traveled to Cuba to take her son to meet the grandparents, and am I uncomfortable about it? Yes, because the reality is that we don't know in these measures.
Okay.
But if your paperwork is okay, then you okay. But if not, is real out here, man. It really is real. And even me, I'm a citizen. I was born in Minnesota. Like, I get nervous.
Okay.
Okay. There is a
Okay.
reason to feel nervous,
Mhm.
and I need to implement that. I'm not gonna
Mhm.
tell you that it's all good, because it ain't. But make sure that you're paying attention, and contact your federal government, your federal representations, to give you that input. And we have good federal representation that care about immigrant rights in St. Paul and Minneapolis.
Okay. What responsibility do you think elected officials like you have, right, to combat stigma, and spread, spreading the truth, I mean, and compassion, both sides of the aisle, right? I feel that sometimes, like, elected officials in this country are talking past each other, right? What's the responsibility folks have, right, to combat stigma and all of this negative energy around right now?
To not back up, to be in these committee rooms, to give your testimony on it, to provide the information that you have, so that we can create these policies based off the data and the research. Like the conversation I'm having a conversation with somebody right outside that is not that is that is a part of the other party, or an ideology of what this Trump is. And I see them. I've been seeing them. I'm not. Look, I'm gonna chop it up. I'm not here to 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 paint a pretty picture for folks to like me.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
here to show folks I am the canvas of my community, and these are the colors, and these are the expressions of it. So the conversations are difficult. They're going to continue to be very challenging and difficult. But for our immigrant community to hold us accountable as electeds as well,
Yeah,
okay?
yeah.
To say, don't make that. Don't make that cut in that deal. That ain't gonna happen. For us to stand up to the leadership in these roles, to contact the governor's office from our branch to be like, what are you doing about this? If you
Okay.
cut in this, you cut in this. This doesn't work.
Yeah.
So like, my whole thing is continuous engagement in the political cycle, and recognize the criteria, and how we stop just being the criteria, but implement, okay,
Mhm.
the strategy,
Okay.
and utilize momentum. Right now, we talked about youth in our last question. The youth are the
Yeah.
momentum.
Okay. Okay.
The youth
Yeah.
are the momentum, brother. And show up May 1st on the Hill at the Capitol, man. It's immigrants. It's a day of immigrant rally. And to show the impact of a day without an immigrant. If immigrants don't go to work for one day, you know how much money the state's going to lose, whether
Yeah.
it's in Worthington, Minnesota, which is a very red district, or St. Paul, West St. Paul, which is blue,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
show up to people going to lose money without giving that. They're going to wake up. And it's also my birthday that day, and I'll be at the Capitol Hill working in the chamber. But when you see the advocacy groups of these organizations that have been fighting for
Mm-hmm.
decades so
Yeah.
that we can have our kids have accessible health care that are documented or not, so that we have our education, our history be in there, so that we have driver's licenses so people can learn how to drive, and it's public
Yeah.
safety, right?
Yeah.
That's why it's important to show up. If you're scared, it's okay. I understand. But if you're ready to do the work, make that. I tell this to white people who have privilege. I tell this to citizens like myself who have privilege, African, Asian, Latino, who have privilege with
Mhm.
documentation, to say you got to be there and organize. If our people are behind the scenes, we got to be at the front lines. I want
Okay.
25,000 people who showed up with the Women's March on Saturday, and we were, yeah. If you look at the crowd, you see the demographic. I'm glad. Yeah, you said, why isn't there more? That, you know what? It's okay that they ain't many black and brown folks, because you got black and brown folks speaking right now. Our black and
Yeah.
brown folks, this wouldn't be the same scenario. We need folks to speak up on that.
Okay.
And so it's about the allyship to show up. Like I said, I know those 25,000 majority white people to show up for immigrants today,
Yeah. Yeah.
too,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, yeah. There's been a lot of other conversations about DEI, right? It seems like anything that is DEI is getting cut, is getting stigmatized. What as as an elected representative, I mean, part of the minority group, what is your take? I mean, how do you feel about this whole DEI situation right now? Right? Everything about
It's
DEI is
dumb.
getting, you
It's
know,
dumb. You know, oh, I'm an elected official because of DEI. Okay, no, because we are out here actually doing what the numbers are. So the diversity is, you can say we're included or not. You're
yeah,
gonna have to include this. So whether,
okay,
like, if you have a corporation of Target that's saying we're cutting the DEI well, guess what? The program's already, they can cut it to be scared of the Trump administration, but it's already implemented in how they've been working for the last 25 years.
yeah,
They don't know how to redraw that. So they can say that it's taken out, but is it really taken out?
okay, okay,
Okay. These corporations. Yeah, because I think about that at the local. We're the state that has the most Fortune 500 companies in the country right here.
yeah,
So
yeah, yeah.
like, and you think about what immigrants have done for those, whether they're working in the top shield of engineering or they're
Hmm.
cleaning the bathrooms. We're in every
Hmm.
sector of it. Our communities that we're here to represent are in
Hmm.
every sector of it. So my whole thing is that part, don't get blindfolded by that. Keep doing that. You ain't gonna go into those corporate spaces and not see a black and brown person. Now, if you don't
Yeah.
want to consume in there, okay, but
Hmm.
also like continue the empowerment of the leadership that's there to break that, to make that change. If we run away from it, we can run away from giving our money, but if we run away from the jobs, they're
Hmm.
winning. Okay,
Okay. Okay.
we got to stay focused here. We got to start our organizing here too, and allowing our unions to be the voice and demanding that. If not, we gonna pull out. We ain't
Okay.
gonna be there. They ain't gonna have a functioning plantation, brother.
Okay. What gives you hope, right? That things might change, right? I know it's like there's so much, there's so much going on right now. It's like every time you turn on the news, right? It's like,
Yeah.
so much going on. What gives you hope?
What gives me hope is us as communities of color and just people in general working
Mhm.
together to change. We have to get in. I have to, if I can't just complain. I got to create. I ran for office because I was like, what's going on here? And if
Yeah.
I can get a shot, let's do it. And we're
Yeah.
doing it, right?
Hmm.
Same way for, I spoke to a man of color who's like, I'm joining the law enforcement. I'm going to
Hmm.
become a police officer. People may think I'm in a bad. And I'm like, our communities need you in there, right?
Yeah.
To
Yeah.
enforce the law for our communities, enforcing
Sure.
the law for all communities. And
Yeah.
and people are like, oh my God, what? I'm like, no, because if we don't have that there, then
Yeah.
how do I feel safe?
Yeah.
Okay, like, and how do we build the policy to make the change and create the
Sure.
laws that we
Sure.
need to enforce, right? So
Sure.
my amp is like, follow your destiny and your journey. Believe in yourself. Ask for help. Get the services of mental health issues. Our communities have generational trauma. Like
Yeah.
privileged communities and white communities here have generational wealth. Okay. Let's
Mm-hmm.
build our generational wealth. And we can't do it without putting ourselves or having the drive to follow our dreams, even amongst the nightmare.
Okay. Do you think like I mean right in our land though, right? It's like I mean a lot of immigrants sometimes are afraid to get engaged in politics, and things like that. What is your message to those immigrants who say, you know what, I don't want to be bothered with politics. I don't want to get into it. I mean, what would be your message to them that how important it is, right, for immigrants community as for our voice to be heard, for our voice to be amplified, for our voice to be elevated?
I get that people, I don't want, you're a sis, you in politics and I don't get involved. Like, you don't get involved? What do you do for a living? Oh, I got a barber shop. Okay, well, guess what, brother? There's barber laws in the statutes.
Okay.
So you political every time you open up your business door because that business needs a license and that's political. Okay. If you are a young woman who I don't want to get involved in politics, I'm just a nurse. Well, guess what? Your rights as a nurse and getting um a fair wage is at the line. And in order for you to get that, you have to create the policy. We create the policy together to make it law. So like whenever, oh, I don't want to get in politics, I'm just a teacher. Well, woof, that's political within itself. So like what I need folks to know is you're a human being and you're in this country and you're in this state. You're working within a democracy. You are a person that gives to this government. You're tax paying. You're already political. So find the avenue of how much you can give politically in your capacity. I'm not saying you got to run for office. I'm not saying you got to join a campaign. But if you're complaining about some of the issues that are happening, then you need to stand behind the folks and be communicating with the people that are advocating for you to have that barbershop, to have that bodega, to have that driver's license, to have your kids be fed, to have not the discrimination. We want to learn about our cultura, our culture. That's all political, man. It's all
Okay.
political.
Okay, okay. Do you think, with the whole, again, right, go back to the whole legal immigration stuff, right? With the whole, I mean, with everything we are hearing about legal immigrants being detained, legal immigrants being arrested, do you think there's a risk, like some folks might say, you know what, maybe myself deport or something like that, I'll go back to their home country? Or do you think that the whole legal status around immigration might be, folks might create just, so much fear?
There's a lot happening. I know folks that have left and gone back because of the fear. And and I also know folks who don't have the means to do that came here 15 years ago and have families and kids that are citizens. So, it's about the connection. I always talk about like the immigrant the Italian immigrants, the Irish, the Polish, right? On like look at Ellis Island. Ellis Island is on Nicollet Island or Harriet Island now. Um we got to learn from our history to make it better, and it's about continuing those connections with the folks that are here 3 generations, 4 generations, and being able to work together to protect that, right? Like if I have I, I have businesses in my district that were built by immigrants that came from Europe, right?
Mhm, mhm, mhm.
That became family members with immigrants that are from Latin America, like who are now third, fourth generation in.
Yeah.
They are fighting for humanity together, regardless of what's going on. They might think about somebody's agenda on this side of the aisle a little bit better when it comes to their business, but they're not cool with how they're treating the kids and their
Okay.
workers.
Okay.
So it's gonna take these. It's gonna take real leadership. It's gonna take other folks, and that's what I'm like, man, we need more of us. I want to encourage more of us to have these uncomfortable conversations to create the policy together to protect. But for our immigrant communities, is like, how do we go about? What do we go about? Is like, recognize your empowerment, know your power.
Okay. As a Democrat, right, how do you speak to your fellow Republicans who, like, once upon a time, right, this was the Republican Party was a party of, immigrants, party of, business. Now it's like everything is flipped. What conversation are you having with your Republican colleagues?
I remind them about that. And I also like a lot of folks in this country of, that has been where has changed, there's been change, because the change is that we're in these spaces to have these conversations to prove, right? But it is going to take the communication of recognizing that folks are ignorant on both sides of the aisle. Like, folks don't know that. The stories are very important when it comes to policy, the reality, the truth, the facts, the data. And those are the conversations that I'm having in a tied house in the state of Minnesota, right? Where we need one vote to flip
Yeah.
to pass anything, is like really having those deep conversations that are not necessarily comfortable to have, right? But like also recognizing, like, look, I'm in the cities. This isn't just a problem for us, immigration. Okay? Because it's not once you recognize that it's not a problem, recognize how it's a solution, we can do some good things here together to make sure that there's protection. Now,
Okay.
if somebody's a criminal, whether they're documented or not documented, they need to face the law. Like,
Okay.
they need to do the time for paying the crime. My abuelo used to say, don't do the crime, you can't do the time. That fits for everybody. But for
Okay.
families that are working and building this and are in our community that have
Mhm.
literally refuged here due to war that has been part of the United States
Mhm.
leadership, like, come on, man. Let's break some bread. Let's do things better.
Okay. Do you think the United States will always, I mean, with everything going on, do you think the United States will continue to be welcoming to immigrants?
We are fighting for that, and we ain't giving up. And we gotta we those the children of the new generation of immigrants are no longer children. They're doctors, they're lawyers, they're business owners, they're second generations, third generations, fourth generations.
Mhm.
That's what the empowerment lays on. Just
Okay.
as much as going back when, yeah, this is a country built on immigrants. Well, this is a country that's continued to being built by immigrants. So
Okay.
the platform of this next wave of generation is going to speak, and is going to have to take the accountability to continue the action.
Okay. Is there anybody in your life that kind of a mentor or any special moments that help you to do the kind of work you do, right? Advocating for marginalized communities, advocating for immigrants. Is there anyone that kind of say, you know what, this person is it is I mean there's a person that I look up to do what I do every day.
Absolutely. I've been blessed and fortunate to have amazing parents that I gave into that introduction. My mother, she's 71 years old. She was the first Latina appointed in the state of Minnesota to direct the offices of equal opportunity while I was in her womb by Governor Rudy Perpich. Okay. So,
Oh, okay.
she wasn't an elected official. She worries about me every day and prays for me every day, but I think about the women that had my mom. I think about the other women of color, Mayor Sharon Sells Belton, former mayor, the first black and woman mayor of Minneapolis, who didn't get an endorsement from the party, this and that, but stuck to her ground and is a lawyer and recognized like the dignity of our ancestors, right? And the commitment of the men and women to respect each other,
Yeah.
and recognize what we are creating for all of our children, regardless of their gender, regardless of their language and their culture. Those women right there, the movements of Gilbert DeLeo from the Chicano Brown Beret movements of West Side, was the first elected Latino from the West Side on the school board, who
Yeah.
before he died voted for me.
Yeah.
Like, his movements broke bread. I think about the Puerto Rican freedom fighting movement. I think about our Black Panthers. I think about the conversations that I held with Reverend Desmond Tutu before he passed. These
Oh,
Nobel Peace Laureates that when I was just out of high school and in college were calling me to rap so that kids wouldn't be incarcerated, and how we could build curriculums in a system that doesn't work for us because it doesn't lay out the history of how we're surviving. So
okay.
those are the mentors, man. Those are the mentors, the people that are in Puerto Rico right now, fighting for our culture, fighting for our land, that are my teachers continuous, because we always got to learn. The
Hmm.
movement of women's rights, when we talk about women's rights throughout the world within our communities of Islam, when we talk about Latin America and the indigenous communities, okay, Audrey Thayer of White Earth, these are the folks that mentor me. I think about our East African community that came post the Latino community in this state, the Hmong community. I think about the first folks that ran in their community who encouraged me because they're like, you're taking care of our kids.
Yeah.
It's like, it's not when you run and you're in these positions, I'm an elected official. I'm not more powerful than anybody. I hold the power from the people. So the power's within the people for us to lead.
Mhm.
The people are the mentors and the children, man. Those beautiful babies that are innocent.
Yeah. As a state legislature, right? How will you say is like in terms of Minnesota? Like, what separates Minnesota from other states as a state legislature here? You know, I mean, it is your second term in the state house.
Yep.
What separates Minnesota from other states?
You got a rapper in the House chamber.
Okay. That's a
You
good
know,
one. That's a good one. Definitely. That's a good one.
we've been the lens of a lot lately.
Okay. Okay.
But we are a strong force of people on this indigenous land.
Mhm.
And we have a diversity of so many beautiful people from different tribal lands in the world.
Okay.
What makes us different, I like to say, is that we're gonna put our drums together because everybody got a drum, bro. And when those drums play in unity, I hope it wakes everybody up to be for peace and on rhythm together. We got a different rhythm going on, and you know, shout out to the revolution of Prince.
Okay.
But I believe that when as an artist in me always, and as a mother, is that if we can get folks dancing together, laughing together, and joyful together, we can create a platform of freedom
Okay. Is
and
there any
justice.
specific legislation that our community should know about that you guys are working on that would benefit either the immigrant community or the larger minority community?
Yeah, so stand up against HF16, which
Okay.
is trying to dismantle everything that we've been able to do for immigrant rights. In my first session, we talk about healthcare, when we talk about education. Okay.
Sure. Okay.
There's a lot of policy that's going against us. So we need to be vocalized and sharing with folks to write to
Sure.
their legislators, folks that are citizens, working with undocumented folks to
Mhm.
stand up and vocalize, going against those types of legislation, recognizing that we have to be consistent on knowing what's there. So my first and foremost is getting people to say no to HF16 and showing
HF16.
say
Okay.
no to it.
What is HF16 for the sake of our audience? What is
It's
that?
a legislation that's trying to stop funding um, state resources to immigrants, from tuition for state schools, healthcare,
Oh,
you
okay.
know,
Okay. Okay. Okay.
opportunity for our workers, our union workers, that a majority of them, the
Okay.
percentages of immigrants that are working them unions, brother, and if you don't, I'll give you the numbers, but I'm getting called to get off this phone right now,
Yeah.
actually.
So
So,
yeah. So
yeah.
before you go there, what's the message you want to leave our audience tonight, right? To the immigrant community. What's your last word to them tonight?
Si se puede. Don't give up. Stay connected. We're in village together. Also,
Okay.
don't just block yourself within one of your communities of immigrants.
Mm.
When I talk about immigrant rights, I'm not just talking about Latinos. I'm talking about all immigrants. And so
Okay.
being able to have that embracement and recognizing the differences and the privileges amongst our own immigrant communities, the the
Okay.
the, the classism, the money, some got it, some don't.
Mm.
Let's put it all together and let's
Okay.
circulate together, and we can do really good things and we can protect our kids.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Representative Pérez-Vega, for taking over the business schedule to talk to us tonight. You have a good night.
Thank you.
Right.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Abe. You have a good night. And thanks for everybody tuning in.
Yeah.
Adios.
Thank you. Yeah.
Peace.
Bye-bye.
Pa'lante.
Bye.